all of the graphics cards for this generation have pretty much released as far as we know. But we've actually also been seeing rumors and leaks for the next generation that is going to be coming out. Depending on the price, the performance, the features, and everything, it could shake up the market pretty significantly. So we're also going to go over those in this video when we have the chance or when it's relevant to the certain situation, depending on price point, all that kind of stuff. We're going to be checking out every graphics card from the lowest price point to the highest price point, new and used. So let's go ahead and jump in. And I bet a lot of you guys are thinking, you know, Nvidia's the top dog with graphics cards. Oh, they better have a good budget graphics card. This is what Nvidia gives us, okay? The RTX 3050. And I'm just gonna tell you now, this isn't the best card in the world. And honestly, it's pretty much not really worth recommending against the competition at this price point. But for whatever reason, if you want Nvidia features or if you want DLSS or better ray tracing, which ray tracing isn't really usable at this price point anyway, so it doesn't really matter. The 3050 is available, and we're seeing actually a crazy price point right now of $160 for this one. This is a particular mail-in rebate from Newegg. I want you to also keep in mind that there's an 8GB version of this card and a 6GB version of this card. And the 6GB one ain't worth your time, man. You can see here just based on prices, even the one that's on sale right now that is 8GB is actually cheaper than the 6GB one. Unless you need a specific situation, we need a very low power graphics card for whatever build you're in, the 6GB one ain't worth it, and you should really be looking at an 8GB 3050 at the very least, even though this card kind of still sucks. The graphics card that I actually recommend at this price point below $200 is actually the RX 6600. There is other AMD graphics cards like the 6500 XT or the 6400. Those cards are terrible. So the only card on the new market here that I can actually recommend that is under $200 is probably the RX 6600. And if we just look here from Daniel Owen, he had an insane comparison here between the RTX 3050 8GB versus the 6600. If you just look, let me hide my camera. 24% faster on the 6600. Okay, but that isn't the end of it. The 6600 can destroy the 3050. Like, look here, 45% faster at 1080p and Ghost of Tsushima on medium settings, absolutely destroying the 3050. So I just can't really recommend the 3050. There's really no reason to buy it. The 6600 is actually below $200 right now for like $180. Now, the only other card you might want to consider, and I'm still actually yet to do a recap on this card to retest it, but the ARC A750 is still going for below $200 right now. This is from Intel. Their first generation graphics cards, I'm more looking at their second generation that is hopefully coming sometime soon, maybe at the beginning of next year. But the A750 realistically should be able to perform faster than the 6600, but it isn't like leaps and bounds ahead of it or anything like that. And it does have better feature set, like better ray tracing. Again, it's kind of hard to use it at this price point. It does have Intel's XeSS upscaler, which is better than AMD's FSR upscaler if you ever need that for whatever reason. It runs that natively and it just looks better with AI and deep learning and everything. And then the last thing is it does have AV1 encoding support, but Intel with their first generation of graphics cards, I'm just still kind of hesitant to recommend it because you might just run into niche fringe issues with drivers or games not performing properly at launch or even after launch. There's certain games like Last of Us Part 1 still does not run well on Intel graphics cards. So I have struggles recommending this to the mass population here. But you know what I can recommend to the mass population? It has insane deals can be out there right now. They're faster than both of these. Well, the 6600, it's faster than the card I recommend on the new market here, and it's cheaper. And that's if we go to the used market. The kind of disclosure, obviously, with used pricing and everything. If you're going to be buying used, I would recommend, at least for your safety, unless you trust the seller, to buy on a site like eBay because they do have buyer protection. You can return it and make a claim to eBay. And the first card I actually recommend on the used market is the RTX 2060. Basically, if you just want to get your foot in the door for PC gaming, because this is the minimum recommended card most of the time for PC games nowadays, and the RTX 2060 really does struggle to perform in the newest games out. But this will get your foot in the door. I'm just not saying it's going to last for a very long time. Where I recommend it a little bit more is RTX 2060 Super. And if we scroll down here, I still don't know why eBay does this. I look up a 2060 Super and then it just shows base 2060s on here for whatever reason. About $100 $160, $170. So it's cheaper than the 6600, at least on Tech Power Up's little database here. The 2060 Super is about the same performance as a 6600, but you do get some of the NVIDIA features. You can use DLSS, and I guess you can't really use ray tracing on the 2060 Super. It's not fast enough. NVIDIA's better encoders for videos and all that kind of stuff. So basically what you can do here on the used market is get an NVIDIA graphics card for about the same price as a brand new AMD graphics card that perform about the same. I think the 2060 Super is actually a pretty decent deal. You know what is a better deal? RX 5700 XT. Now this one is kind of a banger card when it comes down to it. It was going up in pricing because I think people were buying them, and then maybe the supplies or the demands waned a little bit. And what we can see here is about $140 for, oh, that's a 5700, oopsies. So here's one like a 5700 XT, really nice model of card. This is a Red Devil one, which is one of the top end graphics cards from Power Color. So $140 for this card is banging. Performance wise, according to Tech Power Up here, the 5700 XT at 1440p is sitting here at about 59, about 60 FPS. You can see that the 6600 is at 53 FPS or 54. So you can get a 5700 XT for 140 bucks. That is faster than a 2070, a 2060 Super. They're about the same card. And you can get a really, really nice deal with that card. As well, the 5700 XT, it has 8 gigabytes of VRAM. Now this card has no access to ray tracing or anything like that. This is RDNA 1 and it came out in 2018. Same with the 20 series graphics cards. Definitely can play a lot of games at 1080p, high ultra settings and still do really well. And you can get by with some upscaling at 1440p. I have this card and I have experienced it. Does pretty well at 1440p as well if you need to make it work. The only other card I would start to look out for on the used market is the RTX 2070 Super. Now this card is about $180 on the used market, the same price as the 6600. And if we kind of jump in here on this Tech Power Up comparison, 2070 Super is actually similar performance to an RTX 2080. You can see the 2070 Super, it has access to DLSS and everything, and just for $40 more, it is quite a bit faster than the 5700 XT, and you get DLSS. But let's go ahead and jump back over to the new market and take a look here. Because when we go above $200, then everything can start to change a little bit, but mostly AMD competing with AMD. A card I've been recommending for a while on the new market is the 6650 XT. This guy has 8 gigabytes of VRAM, and it's $230. It's actually similar performance to the RX 5700 XT that we're just talking about on the used market. The only problem though is this card is not being manufactured anymore. And you can see here that there's only a few models of this card that are at the like a low price point, starting to run out of supply, which does suck because the next card up that actually presents decent value on this market is this RX 7600. And the RX 7600 is $250. It's not that much of a leap up in price, but percentage wise in price, that's a good 10% on the price point or so. And this card actually performs extremely similar to the 6650 XT. It is a little bit faster than the 6650 XT, but not really by that much. And I don't know if it's always worth an extra $20 or something like that. I think this card is getting more attractive. It used to cost $270 very regularly, but it is coming down to $250. If you do see this on the market and you're interested in a card around the mid $200 price point, if this card was down at 230 bucks, maybe even 240, then this card would be actually a very compelling option. But at this price point, there isn't anything that compelling. I would personally recommend getting the 6650 XT. Now, I bet what you're wondering is what are the downsides of getting the 6650 XT, because it is an older generation card, but it performs similar to the newer card. The only real advantage to getting the newer card, the 7600, if you are a creator and you need AV1 video encoding, you know who you are if you need that feature. You can get it. I just don't think it's a massive feature on the 7600. I guess the only other thing on the 7600 is I think there's AI cores on it. So if AMD does ever decide to use AI on their graphics cards, well then the 7600 maybe could be a little bit better here. However though, if you do what NVIDIA here, say the first card you should probably start looking at is the RTX 4060. And this guy is going for about $285 at the moment. This price has pretty much stabilized. I do have this card. It can run pretty well at 1080p, and with DLSS and everything, you can easily run at 1440p. So this card is actually a decent performer. It's similar performance to the 6650 XT and the 7600. So you do have to pay more for NVIDIA here if you really need NVIDIA for whatever you're doing. You do get access to DLSS upscaling, also DLSS frame generation, because it is a 40 series graphics card. But one thing is you're starting to spend $300 here, and this is an 8GB graphics card. The other ones, you know, in the low $200, 8GB as well. It's like, okay, but the 4060, I wish it had more VRAM. Definitely if you're playing more VRAM heavy games, like big AAA games and all that kind of stuff, and 8GB does start to make this graphics card kind of struggle. The only other card, and I have tested this one as well, for some reason, and this actually isn't being made anymore, but the RTX 3060 12GB, don't get the 8GB one. That one is a scam. This one has 4 more gigabytes of VRAM and is going for a little bit cheaper than the RTX 4060. The only thing though with the RTX 3060 is it is slower, and it is noticeably slower than the 4060, not by an insane degree. So if you're playing games that are more hungry for VRAM, I would definitely consider the RTX 3060. And if you aren't really planning on using DLSS frame generation or anything like that, then the 3060 can also be compelling, because the 3060 doesn't have DLSS frame generation, or if you're playing games where you can use FSR frame generation instead. And neither of these cards are really capable of any kind of ray tracing. I tried ray tracing on both of them. It is a joke. Don't even really bother in a heavy ray tracing game. It just don't, it's not worth your time, okay? If you want to pay more for NVIDIA, and you need NVIDIA for whatever reason, then the 3060, decent. And I'd say the 4060, just because it is faster, is probably the card I would recommend to more people. It's also very power efficient, which is pretty nice. We'll just be aware of the 8GB of VRAM. This starts to bring me into that around $300 price point, where I think there is a much better option. RX 6700 XT, which is actually going for $300, or what's pretty interesting is you get a 6750 XT for $300 as well. And this is basically just a little bit upgraded version of the RX 6700 XT. The 6750 XT is about 6% faster, and in reality, that does usually come out to be about true from what testing I have seen about this card. I don't own both of these. In fact, I'm actually probably going to get a 6750 XT to test that. But man, 6750 XT for the same price, 6700 XT, is a really good deal. And then compared to those NVIDIA cards, this 6750 XT absolutely kills the 4060 in terms of performance. It does draw more power, but it also has 12GB of VRAM. So your VRAM 8GB limit here and in bigger games and everything just isn't really a problem. Also, it's more capable of playing at 1440p because it has more VRAM and because it just is faster in general. The only thing compared to the NVIDIA card is you're giving up DLSS. You do give up a couple of things, but really overall, I think the 6750 XT, if you're after like raw gaming performance for the price, is an absolute banger deal right at $300 right now. Now, the only other card that does kind of skirt around this price point here is the RX 7600 XT, which is basically the exact same thing as the normal 7600, but it has 16GB of VRAM instead of 8. But it bumps up the price as well to $310, which is actually more expensive than the 6750 XT, and it's slower than the 6750 XT. Unless for some reason you need 16GB of VRAM, I don't really see this card being at all of an advantage to you versus the 6750 XT. As long as this card is still being made, this is a crazy deal right now. So this is the one that I recommend at $300 if you want the best price to performance. But you know where really good deals on graphics cards below $300 can really be found? Here, we're just talking about the RTX 3060, because for some reason this card is still sold new. It's just weird how this whole situation has turned out. You can get an RTX 3060 12GB GPU for $190, or actually that's a little over it's like $200 basically. If you do want a faster graphics card and have a little bit more budget to spend on the used market, then you can go to the RTX 3060 Ti. Now this card is actually quite a bit faster than the 3060. I mean, we're talking like, I think it's like a 15% faster overall. And we can get it for around the same price on the used market. I mean, we're looking more at like $220 to probably $230, $40. That is a pretty solid deal on the used market for the price. Now, the only downside is you have 8 gigabytes of VRAM now. Did that because they can increase the memory bandwidth if they went to 8 gigabytes. So that's the reason NVIDIA chose to do that. 8 gigabytes is the only downside, and definitely something that's limiting this card, but also at the price point that's at, I don't think expecting it to have more than 8 gigabytes of VRAM is really that reasonable. If you want to make this compromise to get a much faster card for around the same price, 3060 Ti, 8 gigabyte here is an absolute killer deal on the used market. The RTX 3070, now for another 20 bucks over the RTX 3060 Ti, being about 15% faster than that card as well. Like, you're getting a pretty sizable chunk of performance. This card again has 8 gigabytes of VRAM, but it is quite fast. And I've tested the RTX 3070 8 gigabyte, at least in Black Myth Wukong. And yeah, it is a pretty fast card nowadays, guys. The only thing that really holds it back is 8 gigabytes of VRAM, and it is fast enough to take advantage of games that use more than 8 gigabytes of VRAM. So that is definitely a decent downside. But again, 250 to 260 bucks on the used market, I don't think it's really worth complaining that much about it. Your RX 6700 XT is on the used market here. This card is going for about 245 bucks, 250 bucks on the 6700 XT used, but 6700 XT can be found new for $300 right now. So I'm not sure if missing out on warranty and everything is worth $245. Definitely worth the consideration if you want to save a buck. Let's head back over to the new market and see what is beyond this, because we covered the 7600 XT, we covered the 6750 XT, everything, but what if we go above $300? So NVIDIA offers the RTX 4060 Ti. I just checked this $300 4060 Ti. It is a scam. Do not buy that link on Amazon, okay? Just so you know. This card is regularly going for $375 now. The launch price back in 2023 was $400 on the dot. So it's come down a little bit in price, but it's really not that competitive. That's the thing, is you're paying close to $400 and you're still getting 8 gigabytes of VRAM, which means that this card, depending on the game and everything, it could really struggle when in terms of its performance, it's actually close to the RTX 3070. It should be able to play games at 1440p pretty comfortably a lot of the time, but it's really gimped by 8 gigabytes of VRAM. And when you're paying this much, I just can't recommend this graphics card. Now, what starts to get interesting, card that I've been recommending at this price point for quite a while, is the RX 6800 non-XT. What's interesting, and I've been saying this for quite a while too, because I was wondering when it would go out of stock because it's not really being manufactured anymore. And what we're seeing on the new market, that it is actually out of stock now. The non-XT doesn't exist at the moment. Now, I will say that its bigger brother, the 6800 XT for $400, is super compelling on the new market right now. For just a little bit more than the 4060 Ti, this card absolutely destroys the 4060 Ti while having 16 gigabytes of VRAM. It's going to draw more power and it's going to have a bigger graphics card in general to fit in your case. But before this card does sell out on the new market, you can see there's only 2 models that are going for a decent price right now. So it's definitely on its trend to selling out at some point. If you can scoop one of these up right now, this is a really good deal, even competitive with other cards that are in a higher tier. It's still a brand new card. This is similar to a 7800 XT from AMD. What I want to talk about here is if you were to look to current generation graphics cards, well, AMD's RX 7700 XT for about $390, probably your best option here. It's faster than a 4060 Ti by quite a bit. This card destroys that card. It also has 12 gigabytes of VRAM, which is really nice if you're going to run into any of the bigger games that use more than 8 gigabytes of VRAM. Probably the best value from current generation cards that's available. But what I'm saying though is, if you are looking for a card and you're looking for raw performance, not features, like 7700 XT does have AV1 encoding and stuff, then you should really be looking at that 6800 XT. I mean, this guy is $400. It's only $10 more than the 7700 XT, has more VRAM and is faster in games. Let's look here from Hardware Unboxed. The 6800 XT is here at 66 FPS at 1440p. Oh, this is ray tracing. Oopsies. The 6800 XT is 105 FPS. I'm gonna actually turn my camera off. 105 FPS on average, whereas the 7700 XT is right here at 91 FPS. Is that almost 20% more performance here on the 6800 XT for literally $10 more right now? Plus you get more VRAM. I would be looking at that 6800 XT on the new market at the moment. That is a juicy deal. The only thing here that's around the same price point I want to bring up before we go over to the used cards is the RTX 4060 Ti 16 gigabyte. Now this card solves that problem that has 8 gigabytes on the 4060 Ti. This is a scam, by the way. Be looking here. This card's going for about $425 right now. Obviously the 6800 XT that we just saw for $400 will destroy this card. 30% faster than this 4060 Ti 16 gigabyte, and it actually costs $25 less while having exactly the same amount of VRAM at 16 gigabytes. I don't think Nvidia really has any good options literally below $500, which is insane to say. Other than maybe the 4060, that is an okay card. The only reason I see people actually maybe looking at this card is because it is the first Nvidia graphics card from their newest generation to have 16 gigabytes of VRAM at the cheapest price point, okay? And some AI models need 16 gigabytes of VRAM to function. So if you are one of those people, then yes, it works. But the price increase here above the 4060 Ti 8 gigabyte and against other AMD graphics cards here just really does not make me super interested in this card in general. But you know where there are really good options? Insane options, actually. I don't know how this card still keeps getting better. This RTX 3080 on the used market is insane. Let's find the first cards that are actually like real cards here. The RTX 3080 has 10 gigabytes of VRAM. This is insane. This is such a good deal. $370 on the used market. This card is faster than everything we just talked about, other than the 6800 XT on the new market. It has 10 gigabytes of VRAM, which is more than 8, but 10 gigabytes of VRAM is definitely a limiting factor on this graphics card. Capable of ray tracing, has DLSS upscaling, fast for video editing and everything. The only problem is that VRAM buffer. If you are after more VRAM, that's going to be the only issue probably holding you back. Now you can also look at other cards here. The RX 6800 non-XT is on the used market here. I don't find it to be worth it for $340. I don't think that's worth it. Now the RX 6800 XT, this is the first one I'm seeing on here. I actually own this exact same Power Color Red Dragon 6800 XT. It's quite a good cooler. It does have a little bit of coil whine. I'd say that's the only problem. It kind of buzzes when it's under load. The thing about the 6800 XT is you can't get a 3080 on the new market anymore. And we just looked on the new market that you can get a 6800 literally for $400. So there's, I would say, no point in buying this card used right now when these prices are so close. The only other card that I would say is maybe worth considering, but I don't think it's worth the price increase, is the RX 6900 XT on the used market. This guy's going for $450 here, 10 to 15% more performance for the 6900 XT versus the 6800 XT. And I just don't think it's worth it paying more used for a little bit more performance. But let's go ahead and jump back over to the new market. We're here to where prices start to get really interesting, around $500 or so. Do really have competitive graphics cards where things start to get spicy. This card just becomes a better and better deal. The RX 7800 XT launched at $500 and it just kind of keeps steadily decreasing in price, now down to $470. I've seen this card as low as $460 before. Own this card, I've tested it. I've also tested the other cards that are in this price range really fast. Like, you're gonna be able to crush anything at 1440p other than ray tracing and that kind of stuff. Where it's worth considering is when you compare it to the competition here, and that is the RTX 4070. This is the first deal from Nvidia where I actually recommend. I've put these graphics cards head to head. 4070 is quite a bit slower in rasterized, like normal gaming performance. And I'm starting to think that AMD really has the upper hand here because it is a lot more faster. If you're after raw gaming performance, the 7800 XT is probably your go-to pick. But the RTX 4070 does have some advantages. Say like you want to do some ray tracing in games, 4070 is beating the 7800 XT. Also, at this moment, and this might change over time, But the RTX 4070 has DLSS upscaling, whereas the RX 7800 XT, which is going for $50 cheaper right now, does only have access to FSR upscaling and XeSS upscaling from Intel. FSR looks noticeably worse than NVIDIA's DLSS. Okay, there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. It still looks worse even after their latest update. Right now, you can literally use DLSS in a lot of games turning on quality mode at 1440p. You can't even really tell that it's on, and you basically are getting free performance, which makes up the performance gap on the 7800 XT. And because FSR upscaling looks noticeably worse than the 4070's DLSS, I wouldn't use upscaling on the AMD card, but I would use it on the NVIDIA card, which means the performance starts to kind of get kind of close at the end of the day. This might change though. Actual quotes from AMD executives, they've been working on AI upscaling for 9 to 12 months at this point, and is probably going to launch with their next generation of graphics cards, which we will talk about in just a second here, okay? AI upscaling, if it does come to their older cards, if they can make it work on them, which I'm not sure, they might take a performance hit because it's using a different model or whatever, and I'm not sure if they're going to be able to get it to work on their older cards. That's what kind of sucks. But AI upscaling could close the gap. We have seen that the PlayStation 5 Pro is coming out and having AI upscaling on it, and it looks really high quality. AMD makes the chips for the PlayStation 5 Pro, which means that they have this AI upscaling in the work, and it's probably pretty close. I'm just hoping that it's going to come to their older cards in some way, shape, or form to take advantage of it, but I'm not 100% sure if it will. And this is something to keep your eye out for. These are just what the companies are saying at the moment. We don't know if it's going to look as good as DLSS, and we shouldn't really be buying products on a promise, and we don't even know if the new AI upscaling will come to their older cards. To me, at the moment, I can't really recommend somebody buy a 7800 XT hoping that it's going to get AI upscaling in the future and match it feature parity with the NVIDIA graphics card. I just can't recommend it for that purpose. Now, the 7800 XT in general is a lot faster than the 4070. If you're after raw base resolution gaming, this card is blitzing through it, as well as the 7800 XT actually has another advantage. It has 16 gigabytes of VRAM, which means it's going to be more future-proofed as we go down the line here with more and more games coming out. I'm not worried about 16 gigabytes of VRAM. At 1440p, I just don't think you're going to run into any problems whatsoever, whereas the RTX 4070 actually has 12 gigabytes of VRAM. We've seen games go over 12 gigabytes of VRAM now. So what does that mean for the future of games? Is the 4070 going to age super well? Also, in the memory configuration that is here, the 7800 XT faster VRAM compared to the 4070. Faster memory bandwidth on the 7800 XT will be that it performs better at higher resolutions. So this 7800 XT, I've tested it, is also quite a bit better at 4K. So the 7800 XT is kind of a banging card for the price. Well, AMD has another card around this price point. And we've seen the RX 7900 GRE going for $530 or more regularly at $540 to $550. And this card is actually a good chunk faster than the 7800 XT from AMD. So that does mean you're basically paying a little bit more money for the 7900 GRE compared to the RX 7800 XT, 60 more bucks in this case. But at the same time, this card kind of throws me off in its performance, and if it is always going to be that much faster, it's bandwidth limited on its memory. That's the reason typically why it performs slower, and if you can overclock the memory on this card, you can get quite a bit more. If you are interested at all with tinkering with clock settings on your graphics card, the 7900 GRE can be a really compelling option for the price point at $530 or so. It is a beast. This card is still gonna destroy things at 1440p, but also so is a 7800 XT. It's really a toss up here on what kind of card you want to get. If you're gonna go with AMD, then get the 7800 XT. It's a great value for the price. If you have enough money to spring for a little bit faster of a card, then you get a 7900 GRE. But if you're interested in NVIDIA, RTX 4070 is still a decent option. It's just a little slower in rasterized performance compared to those other cards. Those are the $500 cards. That is the most insane point here, okay? Now, on the used market, there really isn't anything around this price point that is super interesting, so I don't really recommend anything there. But now let's go ahead and jump up a little bit more, and let's go up to the RTX 4070 Super. Okay, now this card is kind of sitting at no man's land at the moment. It's about $600, maybe $15 less at times, but this isn't really like a super common price point at the moment. So it's more like a $600 graphics card a lot of the time, the 4070 Super. Now, compared to the 4070, I've tested this, it is quite a bit faster than that card. So if you're interested in NVIDIA, yeah, the 4070 Super is like 15 to 20% faster than the 4070. You do definitely get your money's worth for an extra, what is that, like $80 for this card. Now, in terms of raw performance, 4070 Super here is at 108 FPS on average, okay? And then the 7900 GRE is actually at 105 FPS, but if you use the Sapphire Nitro version of the card, it's at 110, and if you overclock, it's at 118. So the 4070 Super is about neck and neck with the 7900 GRE in terms of rasterized performance, but in terms of ray tracing performance, the 4070 Super is a very capable card at ray tracing. It can really start to take advantage of those higher tier ray tracing features like RT overdrive, path tracing in some games. So if you're interested in that, the major downside about the 4070 Super is 12 gigabytes of VRAM. It's in a tough spot, and NVIDIA definitely intentionally did this, but it is a 12 gigabyte graphics card that costs $600, and we're already starting to kind of push the limits, 12 gigabytes in games. So I'm a little bit worried for the future of this card, especially for how fast it really is. It's definitely still going to be workable. It's a very fast 1440p graphics card. You could probably dabble at 4K. I think I tested that as well. If you don't think you're going to be using that much VRAM, 4070 Super is an absolute banger card for the price. Now, what's interesting is at this $600 price point, AMD's next RDNA 4 8000 series graphics cards, from leaks and rumors that we've seen, it's probably going to be at their top end card is going to be about $600. If rumors are true, the performance could be pretty insane. Greatly improved ray tracing from what we can see, so that would narrow the gap, and that would make sense because the PS5 Pro has these parts of the new RDNA 4 architecture in it, and it does have significantly improved ray tracing. So what we could see is AMD get a huge leap in ray tracing. Also, we're seeing probably it's going to have AI upscaling according to what AMD executives have said up to this point. It might be a new generation of graphics card feature that's exclusive to it, because it just might not work on their older cards, or it's going to take a significant performance hit on them. Now, the only thing though is, when is it going to launch? It's probably going to be a decent wait. It's possible that these cards are going to launch by the end of the year, RDNA 4. I made a whole video on it that I'll link up in the card. If you're not desperate to get a graphics card at the moment, it might be worth waiting for RDNA 4, but at the same time, I don't think you're going to be missing out on a crazy amount, because these cards are still a good deal at the moment. And that's where we can start to jump up a little bit more in price. This is a weird card here. Okay, so the RTX 4070 Ti. This guy, I don't think is really being manufactured anymore, but for some reason it's still available. And maybe NVIDIA is just scamming people with this card at this point, because the 4070 Ti is just not good value. $120 more than the 4070 Super. And if we look at the performance of these cards, let me hide my face cam, you can see the 4070 Super with an overclock versus the 4070 Ti right above it, 113 versus 116. I mean, come on, these are basically the same cards. And then the 4070 Super is 108 without an overclock, up to 116 on the 4070 Ti. These really are similar in performance. I don't know why this 4070 Ti still exists, and I don't know when it is going to come down in price or whatever. I would think they'd just try to liquidate these cards, but they're still trying to gouge people with it. At this point, you're paying over $700 for 12 gigabytes of VRAM. That's just doubling down on the problem of the 4070 Super. Well, you know what card I can recommend around this price point? And then we're mainly going from $600 to $800 or so at this point. And it's the 7900 XT, not that card. Now this card is starting to go for $680, and I actually have this right here. It is massive, by the way. This card is ginormous. This cooler is so overbuilt for the 7900 XT that sometimes, even when it's under full load, the fans will turn off. What we're seeing is the 7900 XT is going for $680. Now we look at some of my testing. Yeah, the 7900 XT is pretty fast. It's faster than the 4070 Super by quite a bit, okay? But this card is still decent for the price. It's starting to get expensive enough that $680 and you're not getting DLSS or AI upscaling, and the ray tracing performance is kind of lackluster that it starts to make me, I don't know if I would buy it. It is still really fast for the price. And what's interesting about this card is it does have 20 gigabytes of VRAM, which is insane. It actually performs super well at 4K because it has very fast memory, even though 20 gigabytes itself is kind of overkill. But if you're doing anything that requires more VRAM, like video editing or 3D modeling or AI models, which I don't think this is very good at AI models because it's not an NVIDIA card, but $680 is definitely pretty solid on the 7900 XT. We can go up a little bit more in price, and we go to the 4070 Ti Super, and this guy's going for about $780 at the moment. Now in my testing, in rasterization, so not ray tracing, it actually performs pretty similar to 7900 XT in terms of just that performance, but it does solve one of the main problems that say like a 4070 Super had. This guy has 16 gigabytes of VRAM. So VRAM is really not a major concern on this graphics card. It doesn't have as fast of memory as the 7900 X. It is still 16 gigabytes of VRAM, and you really shouldn't have to worry about it a lot of the time. But this card is also capable of taking advantage of those really high-end ray tracing features at like 1440p, and sometimes with quite a bit of upscaling, you can do those ray tracing features at 4K. Definitely when you're paying this much money on a graphics card, over $600 for these cards, it starts to really make like weigh on you. Do I want to pay this much and not get DLSS? Do I want to pay this much and not get really high-end ray tracing performance and all of that kind of stuff? The 7900 XT is definitely a compelling option because it is similar or better performance in rasterization while costing literally $100 less than the 4070 Ti Super. But at the same time, when you're paying this much, I would kind of make the leap to that NVIDIA graphics card. That'd be me personally. But if you want to save a buck, the 7900 XT, it's not like it's a bad deal. I just think the 4070 Ti Super is a better deal if you have the money to spend on it, especially if you want NVIDIA for whatever you're doing. At this price point though, there is actually one card on the used market that is pretty interesting, and it's come down in price a little bit. The RTX 3090 is going for $710. Now this card used to be around $800 used, and it's come down. It actually performs pretty close to the 4070 Super, but the RTX 3090 has 24 gigabytes of VRAM. If you need more VRAM for whatever application you're working with, like video editing, this card is really, really good for that. VRAM will not be a limiting factor on the 3090. It just never will. It's 24 gigabytes. It's pretty power hungry, like over 300 watts, so keep that in mind. Let's jump back to the new market and let's go above $800. I think the 4070 Ti Super is a great option. This is where things start to get a little stupid. And you know, if you're spending this much on a graphics card, you're a little crazy to begin with. And what we can see here is AMD is offering an RX 7900 XTX. Now this guy has come down a little bit in price, but it's this much money, so I don't really think it matters that much. It was going for about $930, $940 before. Now it's going for about $900 now. Now this card is stacking head to head with the RTX 4080. Is this one a scam? $900 seems really low. I didn't see this when I researched this. Well, there is one graphics card available here at Walmart of all places that is a 4080 that is costing the same as a 7900 XTX. 4080 for that price is really good at $900 actually. NVIDIA did refresh the RTX 4080 with the 4080 Super, and this guy actually launched at $1,000 even, whereas the original 4080 was $1,200, which is ridiculous at that price. It's just stupid. But for $1,000, the 4080 Super starts to become kind of interesting, okay? And the 4080 Super and the 4080, they're basically the exact same graphics card. They perform about the exact same in every game here. It doesn't really matter which one you buy, it just matters what price they are. They both have the 16 gigabytes of VRAM and all of that kind of jazz. The 4080 Super or the 4080 is around $1,000, so you're paying about $100 more for the NVIDIA graphics card. Now in terms of their rasterization performance, these cards are about the same. Across all games, they pretty much go head to head. But the thing is, the 4080 Super does have really good ray tracing performance. I've tested that. I don't have a 7900 XTX to test because it's expensive. Plus, you're paying this much for a graphics card. That DLSS and AMD doesn't have any AI upscaling or anything like that. I would make the leap to the NVIDIA graphics card for similar rasterization performance just to get DLSS and better ray tracing and overall a little bit better power efficiency as well, though it's not that different between these cards. The only advantage that I think the 7900 XTX has going for it is it has 24 gigabytes of VRAM, whereas the 4080 unfortunately does have 16 gigabytes of VRAM, though that's more than enough for games, as far as I can tell. Probably future-proof for years to come, which at least on $1,000 graphics card, you know, the NVIDIA started to give us some decent amount of VRAM, okay, I guess. The thing about this card and the 7900 XTX, and if we look here from Hardware Unbox, I just don't find that these cards are super compelling over the 4070 Ti Super. We can see here at 1440p, 4070 Ti Super is at 124 FPS, whereas the 4080 is at 141, 7900 XTX is at 150. These are faster than the 4070 Ti Super, but they obviously cost $100 and $200 more than that card. So I don't find that super compelling. But if you are interested in spending that much on a graphics card, then you can, and you do get an upgrade. I just don't think it is worth the price to me, and I don't think you're getting $200 more worth of performance. But of the two here, the 7900 XTX and the 4080, I would be picking the 4080 at this price point. And then here it brings us to, there's only one graphics card left, guys. What do you think it's gonna be? Classic part of the video is like, hey, how much money you got to spend? Okay, spend it. 4090. This card has been starting to stabilize on price finally. It seems to be hovering above its $1,600 MSRP, which is unfortunate. But if you have buco loads of dollars to spend, again, send a check over to me first. Just tell them I sent you, you know what I mean? And you can get a 4090. This is the fastest card that's out there. That's 24 gigabytes of VRAM, and it really does just like tower over everything else here. The 4090 is going for 112 FPS at 4K here, whereas 7900 XTX is quite a bit below that. 4080 Super, I mean, they're below that quite a bit. So the 4090 just absolutely tops the charts here. Now, in terms of these top end graphics cards, NVIDIA is going to be launching their RTX 50 series, probably announcing them in October or November, and maybe having them out by the end of the year. There's rumors that it is going to be by the end of the year, but it could also be at the beginning of 2025. And that gets me a little bit on edge. I don't know if you should be buying an RTX 4090 at the moment, because I don't know if their prices are going to drop significantly building up to the RTX 5090 and 5080 that we'll be releasing. The 5080 is supposed to have better performance than RTX 4090, and then the 5090 is probably going to be a pretty big leap over the 4090. So yeah, I would probably, if you're interested in buying a high-end GPU and this is like a big investment for you, I'd probably wait until NVIDIA's 50 series comes out. I would hate to buy that, or even building up to the launch of those new cards, and for these older cards to decrease a lot in price. That would really suck. That is about it for this roundup of all these graphics cards and their prices and everything. Some standout deals that I really see is the 6750 XT at $300 right now. That is a banger deal. I see the RTX 3080 on the used market to be a great deal as well. 3060, 3060 Ti, 3070 that are around like $200 to $250 right now. Those are really good on the used market at the moment. And as we go up in the price, it gets really interesting around $500. The 7800 XT, 4070, and 7900 GRE are really all neck and neck. Now, in terms of going up, the 4070 Super, still a solid deal at the price. I start to recommend the 4070 Ti Super around $800. Has 16 gigabytes of VRAM, great at ray tracing, all that kind of stuff. Those are the kind of the standout deals for me at the moment. So let me know what you think in the comments below. Are you going to be buying any cards? Also, I have links to all of this stuff, affiliate links in the description. So if you want to pick up anything, everything goes to support the channel. I get a little cut of that, by the way. Yeah, just thanks for using them. Hopefully this video has helped you and you can pick out a graphics card that will work for you. Have fun buying, and that's been it for me. I'm gonna see you guys in the next video, and peace.